So many press people sitting at this side of the table that I think things have changed with the media, the Fourth Estate. I think probably since the activities of the New York Times and the Washington Post and a few others that there's developed a certain arrogance. I don't know. We're developing as we go. That I could find. Yes, that's the reason why I'm using this vehicle. But I'm not immune to censure or expulsion. Back to order. Congressman, I want to thank you very, very personally and state in a very unusual fashion something that should be noted for history. That is that the first time you and I met was when we, a few hours ago, shook hands at this witness table. I am acquainted with your record. I know that you were one of the early ones back in May of 1965 to oppose our involvement in Vietnam. I know what that opposition has cost you as a person to this committee.
Take the time to focus on me for a second. I have to say that I have been seriously concerned about American involvement in Vietnam from the very beginning. I think it was dead wrong, and I think those of us who felt that way at that time have been vindicated. I guess that's about all I can say. I'm not trying to crow or anything. I'm not trying to say I told you so, but I think if we've had this conviction, such as you and I hold, I think we've got to keep on. We've got to keep up the...
And I repeat again, what's wrong with this nation and what's at issue at this particular point in our history is not the fact that the American people have lost faith and trust in its leaders, but the very simple fact that over the last 20 years, up to today, the American leadership has not demonstrated, has not had the faith and trust in the American people. And had that faith and trust and straightforwardness been present, this nation would not be in the mess it's in today. And these papers that I'm reading bring that case out more clearly than I could ever write it. The Pentagon, it's in 3 tiers. I'm reading summaries of narratives. The narratives are based upon the documents themselves. Congressman, if you'll permit me, I'll continue to read.
I'd like to make,
summary.
I'd just like to offer one sentence, Senator, and that is, if the...
Backed by the United States, DM refused, and I think these are important lines, backed by the United States, DM refused to open consultation with the North Vietnamese concerning general elections when the date for these fell due in July 1955. Pressing his military advantage against the sects, he moved to consolidate his position existing economic and financial agreements with France, and called upon France to denounce the Genevers of the Geneva Accords and pursued an international and domestic policy of anti-communism. Both Vietnams took the view that temporary, but statements could not gainsay the practical import of the happens to
How many
me.
pages were you given?
No, but I've got, that's all in this. That's being released tonight. We're releasing all this stuff to the press tonight.
What is it?
You'll have all the Kennedy stuff tonight that's coming out right now. We apparently, just please, let me go through it again. Apparently my staff, under my instructions, has negotiated with the three wire services to give you copies of these. When I made the motion to put it in the record, and we're getting some more language so that I can get the record proper, that automatically, we think, authorized me to go ahead and do this. So you'll be getting these three documents before the night's done. I tried to do that on the Senate floor. I was, but I don't know how long this will last. So I'm going to try and get as many documents out as I can this evening.
Why did you decide to do it this way?
Because, as I view the situation, what happened? Somebody released this information. I don't know who. I read the newspapers like the rest of you and watch TV, and they say it's Daniel Ellsberg, and he apparently has confessed. I think he's done a service to this country. He's all alone out there, and I think he's going to have an effect in ending this war. And I think the courage of the newspapers to print what they did in the face of the dangers that they face, economically and personally, the executives of these newspapers, I think is one of the great that I run.
What about censure?
Well, that's less.
Why do you...
Expulsion is worse than censure.
Senator, what makes you think that you're liable to be expelled from the Senate for this?
But I think we'll judge those events as it goes on.
But why did you decide to do it this way
Because as I understand my legal rights as a United States Senator, by convening this committee, I am still immune under other facets of the law that have not made other people immune.
Why didn't you do it tomorrow morning? Why didn't you...
I felt that I had to do it sometime.
Senator,
let me just finish that one thought. And I don't understand, as a human being with my mind, that Stu Symington called. Very simply, that the chief executive of this country probably spent anywhere from $50 to $120 million without Congress knowing about it. Now, Stu Symington, mind you, sits on that special committee that's supposed to watch the CIA. Now, that the chief executive of this country did that, hired thousands of people in one country, moved them to another country, and then waged a war at the border of China without anybody knowing about it in Congress or the people. Now, supposing the Chinese people, the Chinese government decided to invade as a result of that provocation, then what would the public record be? That obviously they attacked our troops. And then the documents, because you get lost in the nitty-gritty, you get lost in the incidentals of the day. And it's much more important.
By the documents, you mean the cables?
Well, yeah, carried away. There's thousands.
Do you have them?
Pardon me?
Do you have these cables?
Oh, yes. And I spent hours reading them. And all I come away with is just with the gargantuan size of reading it. And so I could spend the next year reading. I could spend the next 10 years reading this stuff. But what counts is that somebody at the Pentagon performed a study, brought all these documents together, narrated all the documents, interrelated it, and this is a long narrative. And then on top of that, so that people of the subcommittee on buildings and grounds, it's the only chairmanship that I have, and I treasure it dearly.
Senator, are you concerned that any legal effort might be made to stop you from making these documents public?
I think that concern is obviously there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have what I consider some of the finest constitutional lawyers working for me to help guide me in my decision-making process.
Well, obviously, these fine constitutional lawyers didn't come into buildings and grounds. Where'd you get them?
They're kind enough to volunteer.
Are the Vietnam veterans?
They're retained by me.
Are the
Vietnam veterans, we share a same cause. And that is that they want to end the war, and I want to end the war. The information to read them would have been right on the floor in that chamber, but I was denied that right by the Republican minority whip, Robert Griffin.
Senator, have your legal experts told you that you're safe from any prosecution or injunction as long as you read these in your function as a subcommittee chairman?
That's a question yet to be decided.
Senator, do you have any hopes of this affecting
What they've told me is that's a question yet to be decided.
That there is some possibility you could still be enjoined legally.
Yes. Let me state again, I'm not an attorney. I have no background in constitutional law, and we're just developing this, and I'm government. Concurrently, the United States began to channel aid directly to South Vietnam, rather than through France. The counter-revolution of French policy then thrust upon the U.S. a choice between supporting Diem or the French presence in Indochina. The U.S. opted for Diem. By the time the deadlines for election consultations fell due in July 1950, are extremely vague. But at one point they are clear in stipulating that the elections are to be free. Everything will not, as is often alleged, connive with Diem to ignore the elections. Geneva Accords and his opposition to pre-election consultations were at his own initiative. However, the U.S., which had expected elections to be held, and up until May of 1955 had fully supported them, shifted its position in the face of Diem's opposition. And of the evidence that
Dulles said that we did not support the Geneva Accords.
To put this together and deal just in the summary words itself. This is the summary itself, and I would have to reread the papers and reevaluate them and to say categorically that that's correct. It's my impression, reading it from this, that that is correct.
Because the United States took a position in support of the Geneva Convention. While we were not a signatory, we said, indicated in a separate statement that we supported the Geneva Convention, as I recall it.
As has been stated before, Congressman, of course, this is only one
adherence.
In fact, about an accommodation.
In other words, it wasn't a massacre of South Vietnamese.
Not at all. Congressman, I'd like to impose and get into this record also, and I'll stop at this point in time, to read the statement I would have read on the floor of the United States Senate had I been permitted to read that statement on the floor of the United States Senate. But I was denied the right that I naively thought all senators had. And I must say the reason why I was denied that right was because of my naivete. Because obviously through Senate stopped me from reading. Mr. President, can anyone doubt that can anyone doubt that these are agonizing times for America? Can anyone doubt that this nation is being torn apart by a war that sears its conscience? A terrible shadow of suspicion is across the land. Suspicion that we have made a terrible mistake, that we have spent lives and wealth in pursuit of an unworthy goal. Suspicion that government has not been, influence must be preserved. Preserved so that Southeast Asia would not have a communist government. We supported the French with American tax dollars to such an extent that by the war's peak, Americans were paying 80% of the total cost of the French war, not the American war. That was a policy endorsed by American leaders as a means of halting the spread of communism without expending American lives. Virtually without exception, American leaders have built upon those policy origins, provide boldly through the doors that connect this chamber with the outside world. And I was referring in this paper to the Senate chamber, and now I refer to this committee chamber. And the committee system is part of Senate procedures and House procedures and congressional procedures. And I'm proud to be sitting here as a committee chairman of a humble committee and proud to have before me what I think is a great American, a congressman from New York. I did not seek these papers. When they were offered, I accepted them. I have reviewed the papers in my possession and read much of the material. It is a remarkable work, to say the least. Remarkable for what it says about those chiefly responsible for managing our efforts in Southeast Asia in 1967. They flow from full possession of the facts. They knew that we would achieve no worthy goal and reap only the consequences. The study was tonight, right now. We have these documents. We have them under the most stringent circumstances imaginable. Mr. President, Mr. Congressman, there is no... The people must know the full story of what has occurred over the past 20 years within their government. The story is a terrible one. It is replete with duplicity, connivance against the public and public officials. I know of nothing in our history to equal it for extent of failure and extent of loss in all aspects of the term. We can people, human beings, are being killed as I speak to you tonight, killed as a direct result of policy decisions we as a body have made. Arms are being severed. Metal is crashing through human bodies because of a public policy. This government one may respond that we made such a sacrifice to preserve freedom and liberty in Southeast Asia. One may respond that we sacrifice ourselves on the continent of Asia so that we will not have to fight a similar war on the shores of America. One can make these arguments only if he has failed to read the Pentagon Papers. That is the terrible truth of it all. The papers do not support our public statements. The papers do not support our best intentions. The papers prove that for 20 years, and certainly for the last 10 years, we have been
express admiration for your courage, sir, and you're certainly one individual who hasn't knuckled under to the institutions and the regimentation that have become so great and so ominous in our society.